Steve Kofsky. I'm editorial director at BlackBerry, and I've got two illustrious colleagues with me. We're discussing mobility in the workplace, some of the security and usability challenges, and some of the ways that these are being addressed by addressing the four pillars of cybersecurity. Joining me today, Baldeep Dogra. He's Senior Director, Solutions Marketing, and Alex Willis, Vice President, Global Sales Engineering. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us today. As a tech journalist and a marketer working in cybersecurity, I'd certainly heard of MDM and maybe even MAM, but I hadn't heard of UEM. And they're really they perform a lot of the same functions, but in many ways they're different animals. So could you break that down for me a little bit?
Sure, I'll jump in because UEM it really started as a Gartner term. This is their Magic Quadrant when they expanded the requirements for kind of the MDM or the mobility Magic Quadrant to include other devices. So Unified Endpoint Manager is mobile phone. It can be a laptop. It can be any of these devices, smart glasses. We support all of those. So that gets us into the UEM category. But when we think about endpoints, we've expanded our scope of what an endpoint is. Val referred to it a little bit earlier. It's the people, it's the processes. An endpoint is no longer just a piece of hardware that you have to protect. It's protection against data leakage. It's analyzing user behavior. It's the network connectivity. It's all of these are endpoints that need to be protected. And if it's done well, the users don't even see that it's happening. And so that gets us into the zero trust discussion where, every action is an authentication, where the friction for users of having to go through some process to access something really just goes away. And a good example of it is VPN with 2FA. That's a real painful experience for users if you use it a lot. And when you use it when you're a mobile worker, I've always been a home office worker. My closest office is the airport. I'm in planes all the time. But whenever I would have to VPN in the old days, I'll call it, I'd have to start the VPN client, put in my password, get prompted for 2FA, pick up my phone, approve it, and then I'm connected. Well, if I'm at an airport and I'm doing that while I grab lunch or something like that, and then I put my machine to sleep when I'm done eating and I go to another area and resume, then I have to go through that whole process again. It's only been 10 minutes, and it's an even worse experience when you're doing it at your home office. Like every time I connect, I have to go through this process. Why should I have to do that? My home office is or should be a trusted location where I don't have to go through that stuff. I want it to be the same experience that I get at the office. And so, we can do that with zero trust. So that makes a difference where, we just have to expand our capabilities or our understanding of what an endpoint is. But that gets us into Unified Endpoint Manager, if you will. And that happened for BlackBerry when we expanded our support beyond BlackBerry hardware, right? When we started to support iOS and Android phones and then laptops and including Windows and Mac, that puts us, squarely into the UEM category.
Out in the field, people who are using maybe something that's more of a traditional MDM or MAM, let's say Microsoft Intune, they think they're adequately they think they're addressing many of these issues already, and they don't know what they don't know. And Bal, is this something that we see organizationally and something that we're trying to educate people about in the marketplace?
Yeah, we're when you think about what Alex just said, right? So, MDM has evolved. You think about the use cases, but what are the customer needs right now? It's not just devices, there's applications, there's content. There's a couple of other acronyms I can throw in there. So MAM, MCM, and EMM as well. EMM is ultimately the evolution of MDM, MAM, and MCM. So it all comes down to the use cases, how they kind of evolve, how the customer needs change, and as Alex just said, it kind of ran in parallel with how we moved and how we pivoted from being that device-centric company to a software-centric company.
Interesting. Alex, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it gets back to the checkbox issue. I think those tend to be financial decisions. You know, almost every organization has a company-wide agreement with Microsoft. You need it for Windows, you need it for Office, all of these things. So where something like Intune is kind of included into a bundle, it's really difficult as a financial manager to look at a line item and say, well, it looks like I have two line items for UEM kind of thing, and can this Intune thing that we're already paying for, meet the requirements? And if you're looking at it from a bunch of checkboxes, then you could argue that it could. We run into Intune everywhere because every customer has to use Intune at least for part of their strategy. Because if you're going to use Office applications and you want the mobile versions of those applications on your phone or tablet, the only way to put restrictions on them is with Intune. But I think people don't look into Intune for what it is. It's an MDM, but it's also MAN. So it has the application level management, and then it separately or additionally has the mobile device management. So those are the policies, like restrict what people can do, turn off the camera, those types of things. And then the MAN policies just gets into the features and functionality of the applications themselves. So we expect customers to have Intune and use it. In almost every conversation I have, though, with these companies, it usually comes down as like a financial decision. Hey, make this happen. Let's consolidate. Let's use Intune. We're already using it for this. It's already included, that kind of thing. When IT gets that and the security team gets that directive, they immediately run into some I'll call it gaps. And this isn't a bash or anything. It's just there are clearly gaps. So I never look to displace Intune or of course everyone is using Intune. What we do though is in our discussions with our customers is help them identify the gaps, and then we can position our products and services to fill those gaps. So it will keep the level of security that they're expecting. It will keep the friction for users low. So everybody's happy in that case. And BlackBerry becomes a security platform, right? So it has a really good fit within the organization still. And there's a couple of main kind of gaps that you get with anything outside of BlackBerry, I'll say. But it's the level of security that you're implementing more than a checkbox. And then there's the connectivity issue. So BlackBerry has a few different connectivity models that provide really easy connectivity for users and a high level of security for the organizations. Bell mentioned it on the firewall ports, right? So we don't require any inbound ports to facilitate behind the firewall connectivity. And so how do you give people access to behind the firewall resources like an intranet or a database or whatever it is behind the firewall without having to go through that whole VPN process with 2FA, which is already difficult or painful on a laptop when you're stationary. Imagine having to do it on a phone, when you're mobile. So we figured that out 20 years ago. And we did it because of the security posture that it allows us to have, and we can help organizations reduce the attack vector at their firewall. So we don't require any inbound ports. We facilitate connectivity through an existing bidirectional outbound initiated port from the server. So server starts up, connects to the BlackBerry infrastructure, and then all of the connections come back through the BlackBerry NOC, if you will, the BlackBerry infrastructure. And that does a couple of things. One, we then become the first line of defense for our organizations. We validate, we authenticate. Any of the attacks are going to be on us. And what should get through then will be allowed through. And this all happens in a split second. So, for the user, it's just seamless connectivity. But there's no need to initiate that connection from the user side with 2FA or anything like that, because we're already doing certificate-based authentication and validation of the protocols being used to connect. And so from the firewall, greatly reduces the attack vector, mitigates or lessens the susceptibility to denial of service attacks, because they don't even have to answer the port call, right, to then be able to fail an authentication and then tear it down. The firewall just doesn't answer those calls anymore. So helps on both sides. Really good user experience, super solid, secure connection. So that's the connectivity gap that you get with Intune. Like there just isn't an easy way to provide that connectivity. The best that you could do is, you're either using reverse proxies, which is a way, but really complicated and increases the security risk at the firewall, or you're using VPN. And when you think about VPN, the real challenge on a mobile phone is, again, most of these or many of these are bring your own. You don't want to allow a full device VPN connectivity on a personal phone, because who knows what else that they have on that phone. And once VPN is connected, then almost everything's going to go through that connection, and you don't want Facebook traffic and other traffic going through your corporate infrastructure, and have to scale and secure all of that data. So what you would want to do is have a per app VPN, so that only the work applications are using that VPN connection, and you can tie the VPN client to the application, so that if there isn't a current connection established with the VPN, when the user starts that work application, it will then initiate that VPN connection, and then user can do that. The problem with that is that in order to do per app VPN, you have to have MDM on the device. So that's a challenge in BYO settings. Now, there are ways to have limited MDM, but that goes back to the trust issue, and that users, they don't want anything that even looks like an MDM on their device to be able to get, per app VPN. The other issue I hear from customers a lot is, in practice, that breaks down because a lot of these mobile applications aren't like per app VPN aware. So when you go to start that first app, if the VPN isn't connected, the VPN has to establish the connection. And especially if there's 2FA involved, but even without having to go through 2FA, sometimes it can take longer for the VPN to establish before the application is willing to wait, I guess. And so you'll get an error message that says, like, connectivity failed or something like that. It's because the app didn't know that the VPN just needed a few more milliseconds or a few more seconds to establish the connection, and then the app can then try again. So to fix it, all you have to do is start the app, get the error, try it again, and it'll be fine. But it generates a lot of user unhappiness and phone calls to support, and user adoption goes down because users don't really understand what's going on, and they just think, it doesn't work very well, so I just won't do that anymore. I'll wait till I get back to my desk or my laptop or something like that. So a lot of challenges in that type of deployment that we solve just really easy. That's something we've been doing for a long time. And the other challenge with it, when you really get into the security aspect of it, of encrypting data at rest, storing your data separately from what's happening on the personal side of the device, that becomes really problematic for companies that are really worried about security or concerned about security, and not just checking a box. Like there's a policy in Intune that you can say, I want my data encrypted at rest. You check the box, and you think, all right, I checked the box for my security team. I'm good. I'm getting, encryption of data at rest. The reality, though, is that's not what happens. What that does is it forces the device to have a password, because on these mobile devices, the operating systems will encrypt data when the device is in a locked state. So you can only get a device into a locked state if you have a passcode. So all it's doing is just making sure that the device has a password on it. But what it doesn't do is allow you to have complete control over the password policy. Like, you can have some minimum requirements, but you can't match what an MDM can do and say, I want 8 characters, or like a strong password that meets our requirements. You have less control over that, on how often it's changed. Those types of things come into play, and so that's a big dependency gap. That when the device is in an unlocked state, that data is not encrypted. So if there are vulnerabilities on that device, and we know there's a lot of CVEs that get published almost daily. Like if you look at CVEdetails.com, you can see, iOS has about 1 CVE a day over the course of a year. Android has maybe twice that. So you get these potential vulnerabilities there that once the operating system is exposed or vulnerable, then so is all of your corporate data. And so you really need to use applications that have their own encryption built into it, or be part of a platform that handles it for you. And that's what we're really, we have a lot of pride about. We're really proud of the level of security that we go to. So any application that we support in our marketplace on our Dynamics platform follows our strict guidelines on security processes. So that is in regard to encrypting data at rest. We handle that. It's part of our SDK. So you get our secure save and encryption APIs available, secure copy and paste, how data is shared between work applications. We never unencrypt data when it's being used on the device, whether it's at rest, the device is locked, it's in transit, nothing. So, and these are validated cryptography methods and applications of that cryptography. We've got FIPS 140-2. We've got, I think, what is it, about like 80 certifications around the world. So
81, yeah.
Yeah, 81, thanks. So, these aren't just aspirations, or like I see a lot of platforms say complies with 140, FIPS 140-2 or this certification or that. We don't just say we comply with it. We're actually certified against it. So those are long, complicated, and expensive processes to go through those certifications. And we have them because security is important to us. So we used to say security is built in from the ground up. It's not an afterthought. It's not a bolt on, because when you do it that way, it adds, complexity for the user. It's not as clean or invisible or seamless to the user. And that's where you end up having challenges with vulnerabilities that get exposed. That just doesn't happen with BlackBerry. So knock on wood. That wasn't a challenge to anyone. I'm just saying, we're really, really secure.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'd like to go on forever, but I think we're going to pause right here and take a break. We'll be releasing the rest of this conversation as an additional podcast. I hope you'll tune in. And Bal and Alex, thanks so much for joining today.